beautiful downtown Millheim, in the smack dab center of the Keystone State, this is Lou Bryson with Seen Through a Glass, the podcast that's mostly about food and drink in central Pennsylvania. Welcome to episode 76, The Great Sam Komlenic. Over the course of 75 episodes, I've learned that you like the town profiles, you like any episode that covers something that's even slightly a mystery, and you like episodes with semi-celebrity interviews. And I say semi-celebrity interviews because I've never really had anyone truly famous on here, but we have had some people who have a regional reputation. And that's who we have today, Sam Komlenic. I'm glad to have him because he is a man who has, by his own proud admission, next to no online presence. He's not on any social media. He doesn't have a podcast, a blog, a Substack. It's even hard to find a picture of him online. A Google search turned up 10 pictures of Sam, and 2 of those were ones I'd put up myself. So who is this cipher? You know, it's funny, but I'm pretty sure at least a third of you already know him. First, Sam is probably the foremost historian of Pennsylvania rye whiskey. I really wish he'd settle down and write a book about it. Some of you know him from that, and he and I have done several presentations together. We did another one at West Overton Village only last week. He's also well known for his almost 20 years as a representative of public broadcasting in State College, soliciting business support for WPSU. And he's ranged all over north central Pennsylvania, got to know folks, got involved in things, and became fairly well known. You might also know him from his annual bonfires. Before they moved back to Southwest PA about 3 years ago, Sam and his wife Amy lived in the woods outside State College for years. Every fall, they had a huge bonfire on the property with a live band or two, plenty of food and drink, and anywhere from 30 to 150 guests. So if you do know Sam, you'll recognize him in every word. If you don't, I envy you, because you're finally going to get to meet this larger-than-life guy. We joke that we're the proverbial brothers from different mothers. We're both big, broad-shouldered, and possessed of a booming laugh. The shared love of rye whiskey is a bonus. And that's how this happened. I was invited to give a talk on rye whiskey at West Overton Village, the preserved industrial village built by Abraham Overholt, and where Old Overholt whiskey was born. The distillery, the Old Farm Distillery, still stands there, and that's where the talk was. That's where Sam's antique whiskey bottle collection is housed and displayed, too. We'll talk about that in the interview, but it's gorgeous and really worth the visit. Sam gave a short introductory speech up in the gallery, and then folks came down for my talk. The next day, I sat down with Sam and got him on the mic. It's a little bit longer interview than usual, 3/4 of an hour, so I'm going to keep the rest of this fairly short. But I do have an after-action report on the Day of Delicious Darkness at Elk Creek Cafe, some book news, something that surprised even me. We'll get to that after the interview, though, because first comes what I'm drinking today. What I'm drinking today is the first release from Iron City Distilling, their Bessemer Rye. There were only 188 bottles of this single-barrel rye whiskey. They were sold at the distillery in December. They sent me a sample bottle, number 166, and I was excited to try it, given the young samples I'd tasted at the warehouse 2 years ago. The Bessemer is a 100% Danko rye whiskey at 53.7 ABV, 107.4 proof, aged for 2.5 years in heavy toast char 3 casks. Sam and I broke into my bottle the night before the interview, and it was, well, let's have a taste. The color is quite nice. In only 2.5 years, it's picked up a brownish, orange, red, whiskey color. But the aroma is just rye grain, spicy candy, that kind of hot stewed mint, I guess. Doesn't really smell like fresh crushed leaves. But this is really bursting out of the Glencairn to meet me. It kind of puts me in mind of the first time I smelled Old Potrero, Anchor Distilling's rye, back in the early 90s. I remember thinking I could just sit and nose this whiskey for 20 minutes and be a pretty happy guy. There's a lot going on here. And of course, there's oak. There's a little bit of vanilla there. But what's surprising is there's the spice and the leanness of rye, but there's also a sweetness. Try this. Wow. So like 4 things right away. First, not hot. This is a nice smooth thing on the tongue. Second, real mouthfeel. I mean, I'm not saying the whiskey is syrupy, but this is not just a thin, flighty thing. It's got some guts to it. Third, all that stuff on the nose follows through on the palate. Just the spice, the mint, the candy, the wood, it's all there. And fourth, the finish. Wow, I'll tell you, for a 2.5-year-old whiskey, that's a fantastic finish. It's not hot. It's warming. It fills the throat. It tells me to have more, and I'm gonna. This comes back to something Sam and I always say, because we heard Fritz Maytag say it back in the early 2000s in a Roundtable Rye interview. And I know I've quoted this before, but I'm going to do it again. Fritz said, "I believe you will all come to appreciate the beauty of young rye." And this 2.5-year-old rye whiskey is better than some 8-year-old whiskeys I've had. This is really well done. You're going to like this whiskey too. Keep an eye out for it. There's more coming. It's not coming soon, but it's going to come. Keep an eye on Iron City Distilling. I said last year, somebody, I can't really remember who it was soliciting, what was your whiskey of the year for 2025? And that was in November. And I said to them, I had a lot of good whiskeys this year, but I am highly anticipating the first release from Iron City Distilling, because I've had some samples before it was ready to go to bottle, and I'm really excited. And I feel completely vindicated on that. This is really good whiskey. It's thrilling, really. Now, of course, you also get your smack dab in the center, sponsored by the Happy Valley Adventure Bureau. I've tried geocaching a few times. You get a general set of clues, a variably accurate GPS location, and sometimes an additional clue. It might be a puzzle or a picture or a cipher. The goal is to find a hidden cache, often a plastic box or some other waterproof container, and sign the logbook you find inside. You might also log it on a geocaching app on your phone. Always bring along a pen when you go. It's not a genuine tag unless you sign that log. Caches might be in towns, they might be in the woods, they might be in parks. We found one in an old Revolutionary War cemetery. They really might be anywhere. There are an estimated 3 million caches worldwide. Does that sound interesting? Well, there's a Happy Valley, PA Geo Tour that will take you to some of the most beautiful and interesting spots in Happy Valley as you hike and puzzle and observe your way to the cleverly hidden caches. Sign into the geocaching app and you'll find a dedicated page for the Happy Valley Geo Tour. Track them all on a dedicated weekend, or simply take them as you have spare time. It's a fun hobby for families, it's great for groups or couples, and it's just as much fun solo, though one pair of eyes might have to work a little harder. The caches are out there waiting for you. Go to the happyvalley.com website, click on the Explore button, and then click through on Hiking and Biking. You'll find the Happy Valley, PA Geo Tour icon down the page. Time to find your next outdoor obsession. Now, I've already introduced Sam, and you'll get more of that in the interview. We're going to talk about rye whiskey, of course, but we'll also talk about the early days of craft beer and small distilling in Pennsylvania. Sam's job as a fundraiser for public broadcasting in north central PA, and some observations about our shared love for local butcher shops. It's a very seen-through-a-glass interview indeed. Let's hit it. Hey, I'm here with Sam Komlenic at his house in South Connellsville. How you doing, Sam?
Fabulous, considering it's the morning after the night before,
yes,
which
it
was
is.
all your fault.
all my fault.
All your fault. Absolutely. I can't blame myself.
Well, no, that would be pointless, wouldn't
Absolutely.
it? Yeah. I've already talked to you. Oh, well, no, that's not true. I've already talked about you on the podcast before, but mainly in your role as a rye whiskey historian. There's more to your story.
Oh, a little bit.
Yeah.
Little bit.
Let's talk about. Let's talk about where we met, because that is kind of the story too. Did we meet at the State College Microfest?
Yes.
And that was...
You were doing a presentation. I don't remember what the seminar was, unfortunately. It's been a long time ago.
Yeah, when the hell was it? Like 2000?
But that was a great beer festival.
That was a great festival.
That was a great festival.
Yeah.
And it's a shame it
Yeah.
devolved and disappeared.
Yeah.
But the problem was it was a for-profit festival, and there were no such things at the time.
Yeah.
And when people found out that those proceeds were going into someone's pockets,
Yeah, they
it
lost
sort
their
of
minds.
soured the whole
Yeah.
concept.
Yeah.
But it was a great show while it lasted.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, John Hansel did a presentation there at one point.
Garrett Oliver.
Garrett Oliver,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, it was a big deal. But then the first time we really spent time together was at the Lion Brewery's 100th anniversary party in 2003.
Yeah.
And that was only the second time I had ever been thrown out of a bar, and it was with you.
That's the first time for
No,
me.
it was the second time for me. The first was with Ken Homan.
The thing was, we got thrown out of the bar and we hadn't even had a drink.
We hadn't even had a drink, and we weren't trying to make trouble.
No.
But we walked in there. You got free drink tickets.
Yes.
Everybody at the party got 2 free drink tickets that didn't have to be Lion Brewery beer.
Right.
Because the beer at the party was free. But we walked into there were 2 hotel bars at the Woodlands in Wilkes-Barre.
Yes.
We walked into the first bar, and I said, "What do you got for bourbon?" And what did the guy answer?
Jack Daniel.
And I said, "That's not bourbon."
And I said, no, he's right. That's not bourbon. And it went south from there.
It went south from there. And the guy said, "Get out of here. Get out of here."
I think the thing that put him over the edge was when the woman behind the bar looked at the bottle
It's
and
right.
said, "Oh, they're right."
It doesn't say bourbon. So we
say.
went to the second bar. And I said, "What do you got for bourbon?" And he said, "Jim Beam." And I said, "Great, I'll have that. Let me have Jim Beam."
And they treated us like gentlemen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even though we're not.
Even though we're not. Then at one point, you sent me an email about working for Malt Advocate.
I was a regular reader of Malt Advocate. At the time, it was available in the state stores. You could go to the liquor store in Pennsylvania and purchase a Malt Advocate, much like you could a Wine Spectator.
Sure.
And eventually the magazine folded into the Wine Spectator company, Shanken Communications.
Mm-hmm.
But I always thought it was a very high-quality magazine. I grew up in the beer business. My dad worked for the Jones Brewery in Smithton, PA for 35 years. I literally grew up at that place. So I had a deep interest in beer growing up. And I just lost my train of thought.
You sure did. You were talking about why you were reading Malt Advocate.
Oh, and it was a great magazine because as opposed to the beer magazines at the time, the beer magazines were very unflattering to the traditional American brewers. They all brew crap. These breweries all make crap.
Right.
And that was not the case with Malt Advocate. I expected, when I first picked that up, I expected this to be glowing about Scotch and derogatory toward American whiskey. And I was greatly rewarded when I found out that was not the case. You treated American whiskey with the same respect you treated Scotch or Irish. And that attracted me to the magazine.
Yeah, the readers didn't always, but
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it drove me nuts because I am a compulsive proofreader. When I read a book, I cannot read it without being critical about the punctuation or the tense or whatever. And I wrote you an email and said, "Hey, I don't know what goes on here and I don't know how this works, but it drives me nuts, the mistakes I see in this magazine." And you wrote back and said, "We have 3 sets of eyes on this. We're really doing our best. We're trying." I said, "I would like to proofread an issue of your magazine for free. I'll proofread it for free to show you what I can do." And you said, "Well, all I can do is pass this on up the line. I'll do it. I'll pass it on up." So I assume it went to John. And the next issue of the magazine came out and I never heard from you. Mm-hmm. And I took a highlighter and I highlighted every mistake in that magazine and I transposed those onto an email. I said, page 7, column 1, paragraph 3, line 5 should be this. The entire magazine. You said, boy, I really appreciate the eagle eye. All I can do is pass this along. Okay, fine. The next email I got from you said, this was months later. The email said, hey, are you still interested in copy editing the magazine? We have a deadline and our copy editor just quit. I said, sure, I'll do it. And I did it. The first issue, they paid me $200. I won't tell you what Shanken is paying me now because they reward me for my efforts, and I'm grateful for that. Mm-hmm. But I made a copy of that check. I have a copy of that check in my files because I knew that opportunity with Malt Advocate was going to take me somewhere that I wanted to go. And literally that association with the magazine has helped me tremendously. It opened the doors to this industry. I've been in distilleries from coast to coast, and when I mention that I work for what is now Whisky Advocate, the doors of heaven open up to me. Even though I've only written a few pieces for the magazine, I am primarily their copy editor.
Yeah.
And without trying to sound too full of myself, which I tend to do sometimes, I am the best copy editor in whiskey worldwide because Whiskey Magazine from the UK desperately needs a copy editor. I can't even read that magazine. And sorry, Whiskey, but it's true. You need a copy editor. So it's been very rewarding to me. And that also led to our friendship, which has gone on now for the last 20 some years.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you proofed all my books except this latest one.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this has done an immense amount for me, especially since I have been researching distillery history for the last 50 years. Certainly the internet has accelerated that process dramatically, but I have no social media presence. I have no time for Instagram or Facebook. I consider that to be a massive waste of time. And so the only exposure I've gotten to this industry is hands-on, which has been very rewarding for me. Tell me
what it was like back then, because I mean, I remember you and I going to some breweries back then. We still go to distilleries now, but things were different then.
Things were very different then. Having grown up in the beer business and watching what in the 70s was 12 active breweries in the state of Pennsylvania, I watched those be reduced to a very small handful. And I thought at one point, they're going to be gone. At some point, every brewery in Pennsylvania is going to close. I was convinced of that. And then all of a sudden, Penn Brewery opens up in Pittsburgh. What is this? What is this? We got to go. Stouts opened in Adamstown. Yep. Those were our first 2 breweries, craft breweries in Pennsylvania. Stouts in Adamstown. We got to go. And I would set up road trips. I had a Chrysler minivan. We'd put 6 guys in that minivan. Our record to this day was 7 breweries in one day. And you had to have a designated driver. Yeah. But it became an adventure. What I thought was going to evaporate into the ether became more breweries than we've ever had in the history of this country before. How rewarding is that? Styles have reappeared that haven't been here for 100 years. I still want to find a craft brew that wants to make Swanky. Swanky was a Pittsburgh specialty, and it was made with anise. There was one brewery, I forget somewhere, that did one batch of Swanky.
Earth Bread and Brewery did one in Philadelphia.
But I want somebody to brew Swanky, man. What kind of, isn't that a great name?
It's a great name.
I want some Swanky beer.
Give me that PA Swanky.
But now we've seen the same thing with distilleries.
Yes.
Where once we had only a handful of majors, and I have a deep history with Michter's Distillery, both the Pennsylvania version and the Kentucky version.
Yeah.
Michter's Distillery, I visited about 5 times between 1979 and 1989. My last visit there was in November of 1989. No, let me back up. My first visit, when I started down Distillery Road in Lebanon County, walking back from the distillery was a local farmer in bib overalls carrying a bottle of Michter's in his hand.
Oh, man.
Before I even got to the distillery, because that was the only distillery in the country that was permitted to sell spirits on site.
Yeah.
It was the first distillery outlet store in the country.
And that was a historic distillery
It's
exemption?
Still in the Pennsylvania Liquor Code.
Yeah.
There's an exemption for historic distilleries, of which we only had one.
Yeah.
So Michter's was the first distillery in the country to sell whiskey on site, and I was thrilled by that. Back then, when you took a tour, you paid $1 for the tour. But at the end of the tour, they would take a photo of you with the whiskey you had bought and enclose that in a handwritten thank you note from your tour guide. I still have my thank you note with my photo, and I have a big head of hair. And back in the 70s, I had a lot of hair, and it didn't get long. It just grew out. If it was frizzy, I would have had a great fro.
Yeah.
It looks like, in that picture, it looks like there's a groundhog sitting on my head. Oh my God. It's like, so anyway, my last visit there was in November of 1989, 3 months before Dick Stoll closed the doors. I bought some whiskey, and as I was leaving the property, I saw a warehouse door open. And because I can't pass something like that up, I parked my truck and I walked inside, and there were 2 men dumping barrels into a trough. And I struck up a conversation, and I'm asking questions about the whiskey. The one thing I noticed was that warehouse was virtually empty. There were no barrels in there, and I thought, this is not a good sign. So they were dumping the last of the whiskey from, there might have been 100, 200 barrels, but it's thousands of barrels warehouse, so it looks empty. And I struck up a conversation with these 2 guys, and one of them said, I said, what's the proof of that whiskey coming out of the barrel? He said, it's probably 120, 125, depending. He said, you want to taste? I'm thinking, is there more than one answer to this question? So against the wall of the warehouse was an old, square, dusty bottle, empty. And this guy took it and stuck it under that bung and rinsed that bottle out, dumped it on the floor. Yep. It was an earth floor, just like a dunnage warehouse in Scotland. Dumped it out, then stuck it under again and handed it to me. To this day, Lou, this was in November of 1989, so this is 47 years ago. Is that right? 37. Anyway, my math is not good. Once again, it was the whiskey you made me consume last night. To this day, that was the best whiskey I have ever tasted. And certainly a lot of it has to do with the surroundings and the atmosphere. But to this day. All right, so many years later, Ethan Smith, who is the world's preeminent Michter's collector and historian, Ethan is a god in my eyes because he has stuff. He's got some amazing stuff. Ethan put together a tour of the abandoned Michter's distillery. The fellow that owned its name was Hostetter. Dwayne. Anyway, Mr. Hostetter owned the property, and Ethan assembled myself, John and Linda Lippman from Cincinnati, Herman Mihalich, who was about to open one of the first craft distilleries in the state, and it was Dick and Elaine Stoll. Dick being the last master distiller at Michter's.
Right.
And so I got to talk to Dick. And Dick is taking us through and explaining all of what happened there and how influential Michter's became in the early export to the Asian market and how much whiskey they were selling in Japan, to the point where they had some famous Japanese movie star come to Michter's to film a commercial saying, this is where that great whiskey comes from. I mean, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
Because American sales were flagging. Nobody was drinking whiskey. I talked to Dick. We went to lunch at the Franklin House, an old restaurant in Schaeferstown.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked Dick, I said, my last visit here, warehouse door was open. I walked in, 2 guys dumping whiskey. He's nodding his head. Yeah. I said, so who was that? He said, that was me and Bill Cross. They were the last 2 employees of the distillery. They were dumping barrels to bottle. Dick Stoll gave me that taste of the best whiskey I ever had in my life. And Dick Stoll, as a young man, looked like Joe Namath. He was an incredibly good-looking guy, beard. He was stopped in an airport one time, and this woman would not let him alone until he signed Joe Namath to an autograph card or a napkin or whatever. Right. But Dick was the most accomplished distiller I have ever met. And it is incredibly gratifying to me that he was able to re-enter the industry in the craft business.
Yeah.
Because Dick understood craft distilling before there was such a thing. When they installed those Vendome pot stills in the Baumberger building at Michter's in 1976, Dick was the only man in the country that operated both column stills and pot stills. There was nobody else. Dick was the man. And the stuff he recalled from his days in that industry, he was a walking encyclopedia. So I don't mean to make this about Dick Stoll, but Dick Stoll and I became friends at the end. And I'm very grateful for that relationship because I still to this day admire that man immensely, immensely.
Well, let's go back a little further.
Dick. Yeah.
Let's go back further. I don't think people have a grasp on just how large the rye whiskey business was in southwestern Pennsylvania.
Most of Pennsylvania's distilleries were located in southwestern Pennsylvania. There were a few that were in northwestern Pennsylvania, Meadville being the biggest player up there. And there were distilleries in the east, but for whatever reason, they didn't have the longevity of the distilleries west of the Alleghenies. And I don't know if that's a remnant of the whiskey rebellion culture. I don't know, because we had a lot of farmer distillers in here, but so did Lancaster County. At one time, there were over 200 distilleries in Lancaster County. So where did they all go? Why did they all disappear? And is it the river access that we had on the Monongahela? That may have been part of it, but it was huge here. It was huge here. And we're so many generations removed from that now that people have no grasp of how massive this industry was at one time. And these were internationally famous brands, Old Overholt, Sam Thompson, Guggenheimer. These were big, big names. Gibson. Oh my gosh, they don't get much bigger than Gibson, which was, again, most of these distilleries were right on the Monongahela River.
It really kind of amazes me how much of it is still there. I mean, you've taken me to building
a few,
and they're still standing. I mean,
yes.
It must have been a fast collapse.
They were built to last.
Well, yeah,
they were built to last, especially even though the warehouses are the first thing to come down when a distillery closes. Our warehouses were substantial.
Yeah.
Because we used steam heating to keep those warehouses warm all year, as opposed to the Kentucky distillers that use a wood frame, metal-clad rickhouse. Yeah. It gets cold in the winter and warm in the summer. We heated our warehouses, so they were all masonry. They were all brick, stone, and slate. They even had stone roofs, slate roofs on these things.
I did not know that.
Yes, so they were massive, and in fact, the only substantial remaining warehouse in Western Pennsylvania that I'm aware of is the 1881 warehouse at Dillinger in Ruffsdale, which is a 15, 20-minute drive from where we are right now.
You've taken me there.
We are sitting in Connellsville, Pennsylvania, in Fayette County, and literally this is almost the epicenter of rye whiskey production in Pennsylvania. And this started with the Whiskey Rebels, and it continued through to the massive post-Civil War industrial expansion. And with the advent of Prohibition, it all collapsed because rye whiskey was already on the way out before Prohibition arrived. Prohibition was the death knell, but rye whiskey was already being overtaken by bourbon prior to Prohibition. So I'm not sure how many...
Is that just changing tastes?
I think so. Distilling here pretty much ceased with the closure of the Broadford Distillery at Overholt in 1951. That was the last Monongahela rye whiskey distilled. And if you have an interest in old bottles like I do, I have an extreme interest in old bottles.
Yeah.
You can tell what year a bottle of Old Overholt was by the increasing age statement on the label.
Oh.
They went from 4 years to 6 years to 8 years to 9 years. And if you date that all from 1951, that 6-year-old whiskey was sold and bottled in 1957.
Okay.
You can almost guarantee it. But it shows the lack of interest. We're not even distilling anymore, and we have so much whiskey, we can't sell it at 4 years old because it's sitting in our warehouses.
Wow.
So it's kind of a sad end to what was once a very vibrant industry. And after Prohibition, I don't know how many distilleries opened in Kentucky, but there were a lot. In Pennsylvania, by my count, there were only 12.
Wow.
There were only 12 post-Prohibition distilleries operating in Pennsylvania. Most of those were closed before the 30s ended. They opened for a few years and were closed. And by 1951, less than 20 years after repeal, they were all gone except Shenley on the Allegheny River, Michter's in Lebanon County, and Kinsey and Continental out near Philadelphia that were co-owned by the same company. Continental went out in the 70s, Kinsey went out in the 70s, Shenley went out in the 70s, and Michter's was the last standard.
Yeah.
In fact, the only reason I knew about Michter's is I was hired by a fellow who had a grant to be delivered to the federal building in Philadelphia. I was working for this guy, and he asked me if I would deliver this proposal to the federal building on Cherry Street. I'll never forget it. I was driving my AMC Gremlin to Philadelphia on the turnpike. And the great thing about this was it was before GPS. I was on the Schuylkill Expressway, and I picked a random exit to get off. And I got off that exit and went about 2 blocks, and there was Cherry Street. I'm like, oh my God.
Wow.
All right, so I made a right, went to the federal building. I got out of Philadelphia faster than any human in history. But on my way home, there was a billboard along the turnpike for Michter's Distillery. Come and take a tour. I'm like, why not? And that started this whole thing. That billboard started this whole thing. You know, my dad worked for a local brewery here, the Jones Brewing Company. Right. I literally grew up surrounded by the beverage alcohol business and had a real affection for beer, still do. And I always thought it would be interesting to document the brewery history of Pennsylvania, which was the second largest brewing state in the country behind New York. And I found 2 guys, Rich Wagner and Rich Doctor, who were already doing that in the early 80s. And I thought, well, there's no use duplicating this. So because there was a dead distillery in my hometown of Ruffsdale, I got into whiskey. And all these years later, here I am, talking to you in my kitchen. Yeah. With about, 8 bottles of whiskey between you and me?
Well, one less than there was last night. Let's put whiskey aside, because like I said, there's more to you than that. You worked for years for the public radio station, public broadcasting station in State College.
Yes.
Soliciting donations across, North Central PA?
I had the best job in the world. I was in a car every day, driving through the woods of North Central Pennsylvania, calling on accounts who felt so strongly about what it was that we did that they were willing to give us money for recognition on those programs. I met some of the best people I've ever met. I met some of the best business people I've ever met. And it was just so gratifying. It was so gratifying. But yeah, that was 19 years. That was the longest job I ever had. I was self-employed as a carpenter for 17 years prior to that. And then I was a sales manager for a beer distributor for 2 years in between. So I spent a little time in the beer business. I'm spending a little time in the whiskey business. But yes, I was a fundraiser for Penn State Public Broadcasting.
What did you see out there? I mean, what things stick with you?
I got to watch them rebuild locomotives.
Oh, yeah?
Brookville Locomotive Company. They pulled diesel locomotives into this giant building and rebuild them. I watched them make diamond tip drill bits in Punxsutawney. I watched them make glass block in Port Allegheny, the last glass block manufacturer in the country. Corning Asahi. I don't know if they're still in business or not. It was fascinating. I became good friends with the Straubs at Straub Brewery because of this job. I had visited there prior to that, but Straub supported public broadcasting as well. So I met some of the best people I've ever met in my life on that job. And it was all in Pennsylvania. And it was all in that area north of Route 80 where you look on a map of Pennsylvania and that's the biggest green patch in the state. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What, I mean, it's a food and drink show. Where'd you stop for lunch? What places did you like? What places stuck out?
Well, Texas Hots in Kane. Tough to beat a good hot dog, man.
There you go.
Texas Hots in Kane. There was also another restaurant on Main Street that was really good, and I can't remember what the name of that was.
In Kane.
In Kane.
Uh-huh.
Merlin's, which is now gone, was a good restaurant in St. Mary's, as was the Bavarian House.
Oh.
And
I remember
the Bavarian's
the Bavarian
gone now, too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely had places I favored. Yeah.
Any others?
That hot dog joint that we went to in St. Mary's that day.
Oh, right on.
Where I had a blood sugar low
Yeah.
and you thought I was going crazy.
Well, you were.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
temporary, but
yeah. Well, most of my mental issues are temporary. Most.
Yes. When I came out here to visit you, I came out yesterday and I brought stuff from the Penns Valley Meat Market. Usually when I come out to visit you, we wind up going to one of your local butchers. One time you got me in trouble with Kathy by dragging me over to Shenandoah to a kielbasa place.
Yes.
2 kielbasa places.
Yes, Lucky's and kom-LEN-ick.
Yeah. Why is that so important to us? What is it about that stuff?
These are the last vestiges of ethnic cuisine. These are the people that are keeping these traditions alive, and they're doing well by doing that. You know, Penns Valley Meat Market does a bang-up business because they make great stuff.
Yeah.
kom-LEN-icks and Lucky's do a bang-up business because they make great kielbasa. You know, and to me, local is important. Local has always been important.
Why?
Because it's interesting.
Yeah.
It fascinates me. If I am in a new town, I will seek out an independent supermarket and walk every aisle because I want to see what they have regionally that I haven't seen before. So to me, it's important to support these businesses, to show my gratitude for their craftsmanship, craftspersonship, whatever it is now. But these things, these are tradition. This is about tradition and keeping that tradition alive. In fact, I just spent 2 weeks in Louisiana with a good friend of mine. John Foles is a renowned chef in Louisiana. And we did a seminar at this event he had at his estate outside Baton Rouge. And it was North meets South. And meets was spelled M-E-A-T-S. What he asked me to do was bring down 3 sausages from Pennsylvania, and he was going to provide 3 sausages from Louisiana. So I had Penns Valley Meat Market, pvsmokehouse.com. I'll put in a plug. You can get it shipped anywhere. They make the best ring bologna you've ever had. It's dense, it's meaty, and it's intensely smoked. So I had them send ring bologna to Louisiana, which represented the German heritage in Pennsylvania. I shipped down personally some smoked Italian sausage from S&S Meats in West Newton. They're the only place I know that smokes Italian sausage.
You've taken me there. I've had it. It's delicious. I don't know why nobody else does it.
And I bought kielbasa so that represented the Italians. and I took kielbasa to represent the Poles. So I had the Germans, the Italians, and the Poles down in Louisiana. And that seminar was incredibly well received. People were gaga over the meat that was served there. And John had red and white boudin, hogshead cheese, and something else. I forget. It was andouille. So it was an interesting comparison of cultures because their influence down there is French, the Acadian population that moved down. And so you've got the French, the Cajuns, the Italians, and a big German influence down there, too.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but their sausage, man, white boudin, oh, my God. There's a meat market in Thibodaux, Louisiana called Bourgeois, and they have a tray on the meat counter with a heat lamp above it. And wrapped in foil are these boudin that are ready to eat. Oh, my God. So, yeah, I mean, I do this for the experience. I need that experience. I want to experience what other people enjoy, and I don't always enjoy it. Some of this stuff you have to be raised with to appreciate it, Yeah. It has to be imprinted on your memory. But I want to taste it regardless. I want to taste it.
Yeah, yeah.
You're tasting tradition.
I do want to, we got to wind up, unfortunately.
What? I'm just getting started.
That's why we have to wind up. No, I do want to come back to whiskey one more time because yesterday you and I did a presentation at the museum at West Overton Village. It is home to the Sam Komlenic Gallery.
It is.
And I would like you to talk to that a bit about that. Tell people what that is. I have pictures. I'll put them up on the website.
Well, I'm going to talk about West Overton Village for just a short minute.
Sure.
West Overton Village has been called by Robert Simonson of the New York Times. This wasn't in the New York Times. It was on his blog as the most important non-bourbon trail whiskey site in America. And I would go one step further and say it is among the most important whiskey sites, bourbon trail or not, because it is the only site in the United States where you can visit the homestead of the distiller. You can walk through his house.
His actual house.
His actual
not a
house.
reconstruction.
You can look at his bed.
Yeah.
You can look at his desk and the ledgers that were on that desk. There is nowhere else in the country. You can't go to Jim Beam's house. Can't go to Jack Daniel's house. They're gone. West Overton Village not only has that house, it's also the largest intact pre-Civil War industrial village in the Pennsylvania. They've got 18 buildings, including Abraham's final mill and distillery building. The museum is in his distillery. The brick barn they have there is the largest standing brick barn in the state. It is an incredibly important and, to me, reverential site. When I can walk the same floors that were trod by Abraham Overholt and Henry Clay Frick, his robber baron industrialist grandson, chills go down my spine.
It's pretty wild.
Every time. So I was on the board at West Overton for 6 years. I was called in originally to consult on the distillery project that they were going to put in. I encouraged them to make it much smaller than they had intended because I didn't think the business plan that had been presented to them was feasible. But I've dedicated a lot of my time to West Overton Village. And when it came time, when Amy and I moved from our longtime home in State College, just as you moved into Center County, we moved out. See, this is what happens. You showed up and I had to get the hell out of town. Couldn't take it. No. Anyway, I looked at these 40-some boxes of whiskey bottles that I had collected, historic whiskey bottles over the years. And I thought, what good are these things in boxes in my basement? And I talked to West Overton and they agreed through their partners, Beam Suntory. Beam agreed to help create that gallery as an added attraction to West Overton Village. And the room that they dedicated to that collection is so impressive to me. The staff at West Overton, I can't give them enough props. It was their idea. It was their execution. And it's flawless.
It's a glowing area.
It's glowing.
Wonderful.
And I walk into that room and I think this is so much better than boxes in my basement. And when I took that collection in boxes to West Overton, I had to unpack them all, alphabetize them, count them, and have them appraised before I could donate them. And I had them all spread out on folding tables in the homestead. Mm-hmm. And our handyman at the time came in and said, "Hey, what's going on here?" I said, "Well, I'm donating my whiskey artifacts collection, and these are all Pennsylvania whiskey bottles." And he said, "I didn't know Pennsylvania had that many distilleries." And I said, "Thank you, Butch. That's the entire point of this." Because we're now, 1950? We're a good 3 generations removed from whiskey distillation in Pennsylvania, and no one understands how important it once was.
As I said last night, deracinated. Removed from its
deracinated.
Roots. Yeah.
A word I had to ask you what it meant. And I'm a copy editor.
Yes, you are.
For God's sake, you know?
Well, you know how to use a dictionary.
Yes, I do.
What do you, you've already said what you just said, but when you look at that collection, what do you see? What does it mean?
It's representative of a massive industry that was a massive industry that collapsed massively. And I look at that and think this is the genesis of craft distilling, much like the brewery story where, I watched these breweries close. Neuweiler, Schmitz, Kohler, Duquesne, close. I realized that the same thing had happened to our distilleries, and the only one we had left was Michter's, which is why I was so fascinated by it. And then, all of a sudden, Wiggle, Dad's Hat,
8 Oaks.
Who would have ever? You couldn't have convinced me in 100 years that this would happen, and here it is. We've got styles being made. Craft whiskey is the reason that rye whiskey is not dead. Rye whiskey would be gone were it not for the craft distillers. Now, Jim Beam made rye whiskey. Wild Turkey had rye whiskey made for them. They did not make their own rye whiskey. So there were rye whiskeys.
Heaven Hill.
What did you say? What did you say last night? How many cases of rye whiskey?
16,000.
16,000 cases were sold back in the whole country.
Well, pretty much in the whole world, really.
Yes, because we were the only ones making it.
Well, that's not quite fair. Alberta Distilling was making. Yeah, that's
they were making, like you said, they were making rye spirit, but they weren't necessarily aging it and making rye whiskey.
Oh, no. Alberta Distilling, that's all they do. They make rye whiskey.
All right. Yeah.
I misspoke.
With rare exception,
yes.
We made all the rye whiskey.
Yes.
In fact, I'm still a bit skeptical when I see Canadian rye, since it doesn't have to have any rye in it to be called rye.
No, but as I said last night, there are quite a few of them now that are.
Well, once again, craft distilling. And, the emergence of brands like Bush Pilot and Lot Number 40. Those brands really helped that rye resurgence in Canada.
Yes.
And in the United States. Remember Bush Pilot?
I do.
You got to be kidding me, man.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
So, I watched these distilleries in Kentucky closing. Now, all of a sudden, it's a robust industry. It's not as robust as it was a couple of years ago, but it's still not bad.
Yeah.
And, like you mentioned last night, all this doom and gloom is not.
No.
It doesn't compute. Because they're still selling so much more whiskey now than they were 20 years ago.
And there's so many more
So now
of us
it's slowing down.
that know about it.
Anybody that's been in this industry for a while knew it was going to slow down sometime.
Had to.
But it's okay. So now that cycle is on the downturn. But they're still going to be selling more whiskey at the bottom of whatever this trough is going to be than they were at the height in 1970. Because the bar I drank at, the Longhorn Saloon in Smithton, PA, when I came of age in 1977, they still had 2 Pennsylvania distilled ryes behind the bar, Old Overholt and Sam Thompson. And I liked Sam Thompson better, and I found out later that it was distilled by Dick Stoll. No wonder. See, it all comes back to Dick Stoll.
All comes back to Dick Stoll. And that's a good place to wind it up.
Yep.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you. I appreciate your interest.
Yeah.
And your friendship.
Always.
You're a good buddy.
Take care, man. Hey, good times. You heard Sam say a couple of times that it was the morning after the night before. We may have not been at our absolute best. The night before, we had put on the West Overton event, where we'd had 3 small samples of whiskey, 2 of West Overton's own make from their small still on premises, and some of Beam's A. Overholt rye. But when we got back to Sam's house, there were 8 bottles sitting on the table, and we got into all of them, including a 4-year-old rice whiskey he'd just brought back from Louisiana, and some of the last whiskey Dick Stoll ever distilled. As Sam said, it always comes back to Dick Stoll. Now, as they say, we are professionals. Don't try this at home. And if you do, stay at home. Kathy and I had some fun last week. I told you that Elk Creek Cafe was having their annual Day of Delicious Darkness 2 weeks ago. When the day actually came, we were nervous. Millheim Borough had announced a boil water advisory the day before. Would they be able to cope in the Elk Creek kitchen without water? Shouldn't have worried. Everyone jumped on it Saturday afternoon, bringing gallons and gallons of water in from next door Aaronsburg, which is on a separate water system. Everything was ready for the 1 o'clock opening session, and as usual, people were lined up waiting to get in. What would have been half a block if we had blocks in Millheim. 8 beers were on offer as usual, 2 barrel-aged Big Trout Stouts, the excellent Black Ale, the new batch of Tail Dragger Imperial Stout, some of the dwindling supply of Floodwaters Stout from 2021, a barrel-aged Prince's Porter, and 2 guest beers from Devon Shellhammer Smith at Clarion River Brewing, a Belgian Dark Strong Ale aged on cacao nibs, and more of the Premature Burial barley wine we've been lucky enough to have on cask these past few weeks. It was hard to pick a favorite, and I don't have to, but I am going to see if we can get the Black Ale on the regular dispense list. That stuff is killer. The food was great. Chef John, you remember him from last episode, really outdid himself. We had raw and fried oysters, a great cheese board, crispy pork belly, and a deliciously rich cassoulet. I was asked to employ my delicate and dulcet tones to announce Last Call over the happy roar of the crowd. I did, with pleasure. I used to give Last Call at WhiskyFest, and this was a nostalgic recap for me. So you have to let them know that the event's almost over, while simultaneously cheering them on for having such a great time. It went well, and I was asked if I'd mind coming down to do it again at the second session, which I did. Always fun times in beautiful downtown Millheim. You know what else I did last week? I signed a contract with Lyons Press, a subsidiary of Globe Pequot, to do a new whiskey book in collaboration with my good friend, illustrator M. Sauter. I really thought American Whiskey Masterclass would be my last whiskey book. I've just turned 67. I'm winding down my career. I'm looking forward to reading, learning to play the concertina. Truly, I have one already, and I've wanted to learn for years. Maybe taking a swing at writing some fiction. But then M emailed me last January and asked me if I'd ever be interested in doing an illustrated whiskey guide together. And I immediately decided that I'm not done with whiskey books quite yet, because I was hugely excited by the thought of working with her on one. And in less than 10 minutes, I had emailed her back and said, yes, let's do that. Em is a talented cartoonist and has several illustrated beer books on the market, including Beer is for Everyone, of legal drinking age, and Hooray for Craft Beer. She's a prolific illustrator and does the Pints and Panels website with beer pairings and educational illustrations. Her work is admirable for its obsession with accurate detail, something I appreciate and approve. We've judged beers together several times, and I know she loves a good dunkel. She also enjoys when I start pulling flasks out after judging is over, an occasion our mutual friend John Hall calls pocket whiskey. We don't have a title for the book yet. We had one for the proposal, but we decided we weren't really nuts about it, so we need to come up with one we are nuts about. But we've got the idea down solid. It's an introduction to whiskey with illustrations. How's it made? How did that happen? How are the different whiskeys different? Why do they use oak barrels? Good whiskey cocktails. What 5 bottles you should have at home? How to taste to get the most out of it? And so on. all with M's friendly pictures. The deadline is September 1st, but I've got to get my part of it done by mid-July. My son's getting married at the end of August, so the decks must be cleared well before that. The podcast might be impacted, but I think I can keep all the balls in the air. With one thing and another, the book probably won't be on the market till early fall of 2027, but it's going to be worth the wait. That's the show. My thanks to Sam Komlenic for the interview, and to him and his wife Amy for letting me stay with them while I was in Southwest PA. Great to see you guys. I'm just sorry you're not in Center County anymore. As always, you can find pictures for this episode on Instagram at Stag Podcast and on Facebook at Seen Through a Glass. If you're listening to the show on the radio at WSOV, there are over 70 more episodes to enjoy at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, or any of the major podcast sources. We talked about the Monongahela River Valley this time. One of the things Sam mentioned when we were out cruising around was that the Mon flows north. We seem to feel that's unusual because in North America, so many of the major rivers run south. The Mississippi, the Hudson, the Missouri, the Connecticut, the Rio Grande, and Colorado rivers all do, and so does our own Susquehanna. But it's not unusual in the area where the Monongahela flows. To the east, the Mon's two major tributaries, the Cheat and the Youghiogheny rivers, both flow north, joining the Monongahela before it flows into the Ohio River. To the southwest, in West Virginia, is the New River, which also flows north under the spectacular New River Gorge Bridge and on to join the Kanawha River before it also flows into the Ohio. All of these are very old rivers, predating the Ice Age. The oddly named New River is actually believed to be one of the 5 oldest rivers in the world. They all run north along the western slopes of the Appalachians, or Appalachians in the case of the New River, which rises down south in Ashe County, North Carolina, where that's the predominant pronunciation. If you haven't heard the Ashe County episode, by the way, it's number 18. Give it a listen. And now, the next episode will definitely be about A Star in the Forest, the black cherry capital of the world, and, I believe, a likely birthplace of the Texas hot, Kane, Pennsylvania. The interview is a definite departure from our usual guests, and here's another tease. I've got an even more unusual guest scheduled for April. It's a couple things I've been wanting to try. I think you'll like it. I hope so. Until then, thanks for listening. This is Lou Bryson on Seen Through a Glass from the smack dab center of the Keystone State.